And welcome to the One More Thing podcast. I'm Pastor Troy, and I'm joined with Pastor Larry today. Thanks for being here, man.
Good morning.
Hey. So we're in week 2 of the series Summer at the Lake, and you were talking about this idea of a very famous story of Jesus in the boat with his disciples, and a storm rolls in and upsets the boat, upsets the disciples, but Jesus is chilling. But I love the way you brought in the actual video evidence, if you will, of the Sea of Galilee when you guys visited at Suncoast. Well, I thought it was an important piece that resonated with people's experience. But why did you? I mean, why bring that clip in? I thought it was a home run for that.
Well, I think that it's good for people to have a visual connection, and the more visual aids we do, I think is better. Secondly, people love to see themselves on the screen.
Yeah.
And out of those 35 in that one scene, then the 35 the others, there's about 70 people that have gone to Israel, at least in those 2 trips. I've taken 6 trips, over 100 people, maybe 125 people I've taken to Israel, and nothing impacts them as much as seeing it. And the story there on that last trip, which Becky was like, "Oh, you should see it when the sun is on it. It's beautiful," and she's right. It's really pretty.
Yeah.
But on that day, it was stormy, and it had just a powerful impact. And you saw Anita Cupo in that video toward the end. She said, "Oh, this is amazing," because you could sense Jesus being in the boat on a rainy, stormy day. And so it just gave a little extra impact.
Yeah. And you gave a description about how those storms come over that mountain because of the topography of Israel is very strange. It could be tropical, it could be cold, and then desert.
Right.
And that lends itself to these pretty harrowing storms. And so for the message you gave, one of the things you kind of situated your questions or the points a little bit differently than you usually do by posing questions.
Right.
So the first one I thought was really, really interesting, was one I think a lot of people resonated with, was asking God, I mean, don't you care about us?
Right.
Why is this crap happening in my life? Why is this storm emerging in the first place? Well, how do you respond as a pastor, to put the pastor hat on, when people believe in God, they trust God, they have faith in God, and these storms arise, and we know God is, quote unquote, all powerful, but why do we still feel that sort of penchant to ask, don't you even care about me?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think it goes back to our understanding, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, of who God is. Mm-hmm. And if God's this all-powerful creator and bad things happen and he knows about it, then why didn't he fix it?
Yeah.
And I think the idea of a fix-it God is probably a false narrative. But I do think that when someone's broken, my point is to care deeply for them, not to say, "Oh, suck it up."
That's right.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, all those terrible things that people say,
Yeah.
but simply to listen and care. I don't want you to fix me. I just want you to hear me.
That's right.
And that's the great story from one of the guys, Dan, from his wife. But I think it's a good question. But sometimes on our journey, people are broken and they're wounded and they're hurting. And why doesn't God fix it? And the response I usually give is that God is with you. He cares about you. You're not alone. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that are important.
Yeah.
Not necessarily fix me.
Yeah.
But we're part of the evangelical community, which I've been part of. Is they're sick. Let's get everybody to pray.
Yeah.
Because the more people we get, the more prayer out there, the more God might be convinced to heal them. So we got to pray for.
That's right.
We got to really get more people. And of course, I love to tell this story, and I have many times. I've prayed for so many people who've been ill, and a certain percentage of those die.
Yeah.
And I pray for relationships to be restored, and some of them end in divorce.
Yep.
And I pray for all kinds of things that are not necessarily, I don't get the answer that people want.
Yeah.
So I ask people, do you really want me to pray for you?
That's right.
Because my prayers but they're authentic. What I really think prayer is that deep within me, God dwells, and within you. Mm-hmm. And when I pray for you, I'm simply saying, hey, I'm going to have you on my heart.
Yeah.
And God knows when you're on my heart, you're on his heart. And I remember, and you're not going through this alone. And maybe I'll call them more, or text them more, or send them an email, or somehow give them a little more than just a casual how you doing, and give them a full embrace.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And I don't think God is a fix-it God.
Yeah.
I think he's a God that's always in the boat of our lives.
Yeah. I loved how you said that the fix-it mentality, it's almost like an entitlement mentality. Like we can do enough to change God's mind about something. You know, God can be bribed in a particular way. There was another part where, and I guess this is where I'm asking you to put your interpreter's hat on, because we read this story, and I think we romanticize Jesus quite a bit here in the West. But Jesus isn't like, and I'm going to say something very similar in this week's sermon about Peter being, walking out on the water. Like Jesus isn't moved by the winds and the waves. He's sleeping on the little cushion. And one of your final questions was, who is this? Like, who is this guy, Jesus? Because I found it fascinating. Again, I want to ask you your interpretation, was this idea, why is he not moved by that wind and wave? Is he not concerned about it? Or does he see something or some element to our lives on the other side of the storm that maybe we won't see? Like, how would you interpret that for someone who, without romanticizing Jesus as, hey, I've got it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, first of all, it says, and the biblical narrative, it's what we have. Yep. And the story that's there was told for a purpose. But I love a couple of facts I left out, or nuances. Yeah. One is Jesus said, hey, let's go to the other side of the lake.
Yeah.
So he didn't say, let's go to the middle of the lake and drown.
That's right.
So at the beginning, he said, didn't you guys hear me when I got in the boat? I said, we're going to go to the other side of the lake. Yet you guys are freaked out halfway through the journey. You've thrown your hands up and you're saying, oh, we're going to all die.
Yeah.
But that's not what it said. And the other nuance, I'd love to spend more time with this, and they took him just as he was.
Yeah.
As opposed to dressed up, sailor's hat.
Yeah.
Life jacket. Exactly what did the biblical writer mean when he said that? And I think those are fun points to play with. And I don't think there's an absolute answer, but we can let our imaginations wander, which is what a story should do.
That's right.
So this is a great story. It tells a great truth. And some people want to bring out all the literal nuances, to which I go, but be careful that you don't miss the point of the story.
That's right.
Let's go to the other side of the lake. He got in the boat. They freaked out. And he said, oh, you guys, don't you have any faith at all?
Yeah.
Don't you remember I told you we're going to get to the other side?
That's right.
Yeah, you're freaking out. And people who freak out like I do.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't take much. A certain personality type, man, they just love to, if something happens and they just freak out.
That's right.
How do we calm them? And I think Jesus in the boat of their life is a calming presence.
Yeah.
So anyway.
That was really the way you talked about the story of your cousin, like freaking out so much, like talking in his sleep, like having a business conversation. I think a lot of us, we have things going on in our life that affect us not only emotionally, but like psychologically, because the storms come in all sort of shapes and sizes, right? But for the disciples, when you put yourself in their sort of shoes, like how do you, again, help people navigate through those storms of life? Because some storms, like in the video you showed, it looked like just like a cloud, like a little rain. But then that storm's much different than something that is battering a boat. And people turn to you and I, pastors on staff, Pastor Brett, to help almost like calm their senses toward what they're experiencing. So what would you say, like, because there are probably people listening right now that are going through a storm and feel like God's abandoned them,
right? God's
sleeping on the job. Like, what would you say to them as they go through different elements of the storm?
Well, Henry Nouwen, the Catholic priest, he wrote a book called The Wounded Healer. And one of the excellent things that the point is that sometimes we go to those who are so deeply wounded, and we're just there. It's called the ministry of presence. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to answer any questions. You're just there to stand by. And sometimes when people are going through these traumatic things, they need to know that someone cares. Number one. I think also they need to be reassured repeatedly that God is with you.
Yeah.
He is always with you, and he has not abandoned you, and he would never abandon you. But when I get in my theistic mindset, or I get into a certain mindset, here's the way it works. I'm in a crisis. I pray. God fixes it, and things are better.
Yeah.
And at some point you go, life is full of storms. God is always with me. No matter what comes, I'm with him all the way to the other side.
Yeah.
And how do we say that 10 different ways that
Yeah.
brings comfort and reassurance to a heart that's broken? I was texting a guy this morning who has stage 4 cancer, and he's just broken.
Yeah.
And you're on my heart, you're on my mind. I'm praying for you, and that's all authentic.
Yeah.
And he is just he wants to live.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I want to live too.
Yeah.
So how do we help people navigate those storms? We can't ignore them.
That's right.
And what's easy is to say, I'll just pray for you,
Yeah.
and then not do it. So, which leads me to a story, and this is going to take a minute. When Walt Rogel, who was one of the guys that lived on this campus, Walt was a 70-year-old guy, was a mechanic of sorts. He was married for about 1 year in his life and then got divorced, but never married since then. No children, no relatives. I knew his mother, and she passed away. And then finally he found out he had cancer, and hospice was called in. And what do we do with Walt? We moved him from an apartment out in one of the neighborhoods onto our campus into a single-wide mobile home. And how did that happen? Well, I was praying for Walt, and I prayed for him, and I prayed for him that God, would you just heal Walt? You know, that's a good prayer.
Yeah.
And it seemed like God kicked back and said, you can pray a better prayer than that. Okay, God, would you go to where he is? Would you touch him? And then kick back, you can do a better prayer than that. Okay, God, would you go to where he is and you do whatever you need to do for him?
Yeah.
Whether it's financial help or medical help, put him in the right place, whatever you think needs to be done, God, would you take care of him? And the kickback is, you can do a better prayer. And I go, what's the better prayer? And it seemed to me, the presence of God whispered to me, I will do everything you ask, but I want to use your hands and your feet and your resources.
Boom.
And so all of a sudden, we moved him onto our campus. We literally took care of him. I made sure that he had transportation to St. Petersburg every week before they drained sometimes a gallon of fluid off his abdomen.
Oh, man.
And I mean, it was a terrible situation, but we took care of him when he fell and it was a bloody mess, when he needed to go to the doctor, when we finally called hospice in.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we were able to put him in a hospice care facility in the VA in St. Pete. But during that time, that occurred over 2 years.
Wow.
But in that process, when God kicked back to me and said, okay, I want to use your hands and your feet to take care of him, my next prayer was, God, can we go back to prayer number 1 and you just heal him? Because it's a lot easier for me if you just heal him.
Yeah.
But I think during that, the spirit within me was teaching me some lessons of life, and I'm not too old to learn new lessons. And and I really think that loving people and trusting that God is in the boat with you, and he will never leave you. He's always there. You may think he's sleeping, and he may be.
Yeah.
Because he knows everything's going to be all right,
Yeah.
even though we don't.
That's good, man.
So we reassure the people of that on a
That's a
regular
good
basis.
story to end on, man. I thought it was a great sermon, a good second week, and this week I'm up again. We're going to talk about Peter being challenged to walk on the water.
Oh, that's going to be a good one.
That's all that I'm excited about it, man. So I hope if they're watching, bring a friend. You don't want to miss this one. It's going to be really good.
And in Israel, I went to the place. There's a place where Peter walked on the water. And that shows a little place, and they say you can try it if you want.
Yeah.
And there used to be a song that they'd sing, I walked today where Jesus walked, as in days long ago. And I traveled down these, and whoever wrote that song had been to Israel. So I modified it, looked a little bit. I swam today where Jesus walked. I stepped in the water, but if I wasn't swimming, I'd be drowning.
That's right. That's right, man.
There's lots of fun that you're going to have with that. And
there's a
and
lot of cool interpretations.
I look forward to hearing it. You'll do a great job.
Can't wait. Thanks for being here, Pastor.
My pleasure.